Hello, Manfest. Hope you're good. I hope you had a good day today. I hope you found it really inspiring. We're Warm Street. My name's Theo Gentilli, and this is my wonderful co-pilot and creative director.
I'm Sita, Shah, creative director at Warm Street. I'm also a DJ and member of two grassroots music collectives.
And today we're going to talk about the business of culture and how important it is for brands to be working in culture and how they can do that in the most impactful way. In terms of who we are at Warm Street, we're a social-first communications agency. We specialize in music, culture, and community. And we're best known for crafting cultural strategies that put brands ahead of the pack. And we bring that to life across owned, earned, and paid channels. We're really fortunate to work with some amazing brands. I always feel like I'm a kid in a candy shop when I look up at the brand list. But yeah, the brands are like always very forward-thinking. They have the same shared values. And that shared value is all about being set up with a guiding principle of securing investment into the arts. We firmly believe that if you're profiting from cultural associations, you're profiting from culture, then you need to invest back into culture itself. So for us as a business, we're all about creating an amazing feedback loop between culture and commerce, showing that culture drives commerce, and that actually unlocks further investment back into the creative communities that we cherish so much. In terms of today, we're going to talk about the business of culture. We set this up as a thought leadership platform about 2 years ago. We feel like it's a massive cultural space. Brands are flocking to be part of the cultural pack. But there wasn't a space for anyone to talk about how to do this ethically and how to do this effectively. So we set this up. It's a networking community of thought leaders, and we host events, thought leadership sessions, and we have a magazine and mailer. So if that sounds like your bag, give us a shout, and we'll get you signed up too.
And we're also going to be talking about some of the learnings we've gained along the way. Being a music, culture marketing agency operating in a space which is relatively new. And as it states on the slide, we're still learning too. So as we work with more artists, more communities, more brands, we kind of try to refine what we do and find that balance between business and culture and the kind of perfect blend of the two.
Amazing. So why culture? Why is it important? Well, as we heard as well from WMX, music is big business. It's grown for 8 consecutive years in a row. So dash COVID, dash a cost of living crisis, dash a cost of gigging crisis. It's in rapid growth. It's up 9% year on year in terms of revenue. And so much of this is driven by streaming. And we see streaming as like it's a soundtrack to Gen Z and millennials' lives. It accompanies everything they do. All the passion points that brands want to be part of, it accompanies that, whether that's running, whether that's going out with your mates, whether that's gaming, whether that's streaming, whether that's commuting or traveling. It is the red thread we use to get into culture, and we then kind of spread out and explore different cultural areas from there on. And brands know this, right? So we have profiled about 108 brands that have large-scale global culture and music strategies. There are the obvious ones, like no surprises for Adidas, Nike, Red Bull. But then there's some ones that are surprising too, right? So MasterCard, they released an album this year, which is, it was all right. DHL have like a huge global touring business and support network for artists. BMW, British Airways, EE, etc. As we get further down this list, they get a little bit more obscure and surprising. But the point is, brands have clocked onto it, and culture is big business. And we're starting to see that thought leadership come back through. So Twitter found a 73% correlation between cultural relevance and commercial growth. For brands to get it right, the opportunity is huge. So that's the good news. The not so good news is the fact that culture is definitely in crisis. It's never been harder to be a grassroots creative organization today. You've got Vice Media, which filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy the other day. Whether it's Gowdem that, created an amazing blossoming community of writers in London, whether it's Saffron that are helping marginalized women get into the tech and music industry, or whether it's independent radio stations that are like the crucible and the forge from which the next generation of talent come from. They're all struggling. And this is happening on a global scale. It's not just, unfortunately, just in the UK. So brands definitely have a role to play. And this quote from Spotify really stood out to me. If you just reproduce what the music world out there can do by itself, there's no need for a brand to be involved in culture. And for us, we talk about it as cultural cannibalism. Brands should be bringing something new to the party or working with a partner that they can elevate and support. Like, don't come in and try and build your own solution if someone is out there and they've been working on like solving a problem for a while. So we really try and champion our clients to play a positive role in culture, to try and solve some of the big problems that culture faces today, and do so with a real kind of like zeal and energy.
Thank you. Yeah, so as stated at the start of this talk, we operate in this music culture marketing space, which is still a relatively new phenomenon. So we wanted to share some of the learnings we've gained along the way being in this space. We've called this Towards Doing It Right. The first learning we wanted to share will probably be a bit of an obvious one, but we think when it comes to music and culture marketing, there is no kind of more important thing than building the right project team. And by the right team, we might mean full-time staff, we might mean consultants that you bring in for particular projects. It might be also people that you ideate with in the initial phases of a project. It's just really important that you have the right people in the room to craft the right ideas for clients. Recently at Warm Street, we've worked with everyone from orchestral producers to music journalists in really specific niches to even iconic DJs from the 90s. And they've been part of our project team from the start rather than just involved in the kind of output and execution of an idea. And one of the key learnings we've gained is kind of making sure we're working harder to find the right people. So recruitment, for example, doesn't just fall into the remit of HR and operations. Rather, it's a responsibility of everyone in the business to kind of be putting job ads out there in the right non-traditional places, looking within their own networks to people who might not have years of agency experience, but have the right cultural connections or cultural knowledge to help us deliver the best work for our clients. And the last point here, it's kind of a bit more of a production-y one too. So when it comes to shoots, for example, it's really important to be using people from the culture to bring ideas to life. So the right DOPs, photographers, people from the scenes you're trying to represent. And one of the things we do at Warm Street is when we have an international shoot, we try to use people from the country to kind of bring to life the idea. So again, the DOP, the gaffer, the producer, using local crews really helps us create localized, interesting work. So that's the first learning we've got. We just want to share an example of this.
Yeah, a good example would be Ray and Nephew. So we've worked with the brand for 3 years. We run their social and culture work in the UK. They're a deeply Caribbean brand. They're very ingrained in Caribbean culture. So for us, we had to make sure we had the right team that really understood the nuances at play. And we took a long time to hire that team. It was very bespoke. But when they were in role, we just suddenly saw things fly. So like tweets were going viral. Followers were just flocking to the page. We were an entertainer. It was a performer. It was amazing. And we saw that kind of articulated in the stats. So for 2 years running, we're the fastest growing brand on socials in category and rum. Last year, we're the most engaged spirits brand on social, which is amazing for a fledgling white rum. The brand has grown by 70% in the last 3 years, and we've tripled the audience growth. So I think that goes to show the importance of getting it right and investing in the right team at the very beginning that can connect you to the community you're trying to reach.
Cool. The next thing we wanted to talk about is collaborating with the culture that you're trying to tap into. I think the main thing we wanted to touch on here is the value exchange. So we know from the marketing side, budgets are being stretched. There's ever more emphasis on returns on investment, making sure you deliver the results for your clients. But actually on the artist side, bigger and smaller artists, but also music communities, they're much more discerning of brand activity. They want to be paid fairly, of course, for what they do, and also want to have a little bit more ownership of the story that's being told. So that value exchange is increasingly more important, making sure that both sides are getting a fair deal in what you are proposing. And we think that's really important to consider when you are pitching ideas to artists and communities, but also when you're negotiating kind of contractual terms as well, making sure it's fair on both sides. And the second point, kind of related to the first, is leave your ego at the door. So you might be a big brand, you might be an agency representing a big brand, and you might be working with a musician or a community who's relatively small in comparison, but you know the value of their audience, so do they. They want to be taken seriously, and so they should be treated as such. And of course, musicians, artists, collectives, communities, they're creative. So there's a huge opportunity to collaborate with these people, make sure you're bearing in mind their creative ideas, building them into your ideas as well. And therefore, the end result, we think, will be stronger as well. Also, if people are involved earlier on in the process, it means less feedback potentially later down the line. And you're building something which just feels a little bit more collaborative and a little bit more tapped into the culture you're trying to represent. this is a quote from Richard Thomas, who is Kano's manager. He says, brands need to listen to us because we're the ones who understand our audience. And fun fact, actually, Richard met Kano for the first time in a McDonald's. That's a story for another time. We think a great example of this is III, who are a Danish audio brand. And their collaborations they've recently been doing with Sherelle, who is an amazing DJ and producer. If you don't know who she is, please go check her out. She just did an amazing surprise performance at Gillett Square, and it was great. So III have been working with Sherelle for about a year now. They started doing workshops with Sherelle's platform Beautiful, which is targeted towards helping Black and queer communities get into electronic music. So it started with a series of workshops, and this has now evolved into a permanent London-based studio exclusively for Black and queer artists in the electronic music space. And we think this is amazing because III as an audio brand are able to appeal to and access a whole new audience. They're also helping Sherelle achieve kind of a personal goal of her own as an artist and really kind of do something for her platform called Beautiful, which she wouldn't have been able to do without kind of brand support and funding. Another thing we wanted to share is think beyond London. I think I'm guilty of this too, and I guess as marketers sitting in the middle of Shoreditch listening to a marketing talk on headphones, we're all kind of guilty on this, thinking inside the M25. And actually, according to the Institute of Public Policy Research, UK power is more centralised than any other country in the world. So that really influences like the media, the stories being told, the cultural stories out there as well. But we think there's actually an opportunity to tell the stories less told. We recently asked the question as an agency, is Stockport the new Berlin? So we sent down our strategy director down to Stockport, and he had a great time, I think. But actually Stockport is an area where culture is thriving, the scenes are bubbling, you've got people from London moving down, setting up parties, you've got more creatives able to have more studio spaces and more able to create in those spaces as well. And it just means that the scene in Stockport is really growing and thriving. So is Stockport the new Berlin? Maybe not. But there are scenes beyond London that it's important to be kind of aware of. And maybe there are some stories that are less told that you could access as a brand. There we go. An example of this is the work that we did for Berghaus. They are an outdoor clothing brand who are actually kind of ingrained in rave culture. And so for the release of their Dean Street collection, we went back to the outdoor sites of the raves of the 90s, the kind of free parties that took place in fields, totally illegal, but totally amazing. And we kind of brought old school DJs, Fabio from Fabio and Groove Rider, DJ Rap, together with next generation artists to these locations, really telling the story of how these locations influence rave culture and the scene at large. And this was great because for Berghaus, it felt like a new angle. They are, of course, an outdoor brand, and these raves all took place outdoors, but also because it was a story that was not being told. We could have very easily taken these DJs to a London studio. They do an interview to camera, but this felt a little bit fresher, a little bit more unique, and a little bit more ownable to them as a brand. Sorry. The next one, local can go global. I think it's really important as marketers, as people in the culture marketing industry, to really think about locations that are influencing culture globally. This is a picture of WizKid, who's the first African artist to headline Glastonbury. If you haven't watched his performance, please do. It's amazing. And this is kind of reflective of a wider shift going on right now. African culture is influencing fashion, film, TV, music more than ever before, or perhaps more than ever before. And we think it's really interesting because brands have the opportunity to facilitate cultural exchange, to really be engaged in new scenes and new kind of places of the world with thriving cultural scenes. We also think it's important, if you are a brand operating within Black culture, for example, to support and build infrastructure at the source as well. A great example of this is the Nando's Mix It Up campaign. They paired 4 UK artists with Amapiano DJs and producers back in South Africa to create an Amapiano style EP. If you don't know what Amapiano is, it's a take on house music, kind of South African-inspired house music, and is one of the fastest-growing genres in the world right now. So these people were paired with producers in South Africa, and the UK kind of producers were also sent to South Africa to learn more about the scene, the history, and how it became the genre that it is today. And interestingly, all the proceeds from this project were donated to a non-profit in Cape Town as well. We think this is a great example of a brand facilitating that cultural exchange, so really highlighting South African culture and also doing something interesting for UK culture as well. The next point here, again, maybe a bit of an obvious one, but the right creative really does matter. As creative directors, it's probably the most important one for me, but we really do feel that brands can do more than put their logo over something that already exists that is cool in culture. We think there's an opportunity for brands to partner with artists, collectives, organizations in a really meaningful way, and that those meaningful partnerships sometimes might take a little bit longer than your project plans determine. And we think that creative ideas, credible creative ideas, again, take time to get right. You might need to bring in more cultural consultants to check that your idea works for the culture. You might need to bring in more people to kind of ideate with. You might need to figure out the right people to bring to life your idea. And that process can take a little bit of time. So it's really important that that time is built into project plans up front. And the last thing we wanted to talk about is that the experience is as important as the idea. So if you're using people from the culture to bring to life your idea, for example, in a shoot environment, it's really important that people have a good time. Everyone from the runners to the makeup artists to the DOP, for example, need to be having a good time, need to be sure that they are kind of understanding the ethos behind the campaign and living that ethos as well. We wanted to talk about our recent work for Netflix and Queen Charlotte. Queen Charlotte is a Bridgerton prequel. I don't know if there's any Bridgerton fans out there, but it's a period drama. One Bridgerton fan, good. Period drama. It's got music. They do orchestral covers of pop tracks. It's also got an amazing POC cast, which is the first for a period drama, which is quite shocking. Queen Charlotte is the story of a young black queen rising to prominence and power. And so Netflix came to us wanting to come up with an idea to promote the show, and it needed to be a credible idea in order to do that storyline justice. So the idea that we landed on was bringing together a 74-piece orchestra made up entirely of women of colour, and we brought them together with none other than Miss Alicia Keys. They performed a rendition of If I Ain't Got You, which is an iconic track, also featured in the show, and it was also the 20th anniversary of the track as well, so everything kind of fell into place. But interestingly, Netflix worked with us for months to get this concept right and to refine that concept before we went into production. And that really meant the production window was really squeezed. For a multi-million-dollar shoot, we had to pull it off in about 2 to 3 months, bringing together all of these orchestral members from all over the world, working with a massive artist like Alicia Keys, filming in London. It was a lot to pull off. But actually, the idea and having a solid idea from the start is really what brought everything together and made everything a slightly easier process than it could have been. There were multiple stakeholders. There were Netflix, Alicia Keys, there was the director that we hired, there was the makers of the show, Shondaland. So it was really important for us that idea kind of brought everyone together and for us to get behind a concept together. If you haven't watched this video, please do. I'm really proud of it. It's got millions of views, but I think this is why we do the work that we do, which is a quote that, one of my favorite quotes from the YouTube video. I've never seen a diverse women's orchestra before. I never even knew it existed. It was so beautiful, I had to pause the video and take it in. The representation is real. To be the minority when we've only been, to be the majority when we've only been the minority, to be seen, acknowledged, it does something to your bones. And she goes on to talk about the amazing orchestra and the amazing kind of performances as well. But this is really why we do what we do and why credible ideas really matter, because not only are you delivering results for clients, you're shifting the needle and doing something interesting in culture.
Okay. Should I take up here? We don't want to run out of time, but I'll just finish on this, which is run the marathon, not the sprint. Culture takes time. It's not an overnight success. We really challenge our brands to take a long-term view. You can still get amazing benefits in the short term, but we like to try and think about a longer-term growth curve, thinking about that journey from awareness and the first initial cultural awareness to kind of full cultural advocacy. And sometimes that can be a multi-year strategy, but we're we're in our sweet spot when we're building that for brave brands and doing amazing work that supports grassroots communities. So just want to say thank you so much for having us today. It's been a pleasure to speak to you all. Thank you.